virtual machine disk types. So we have seen that we create virtual machine, and with virtual machine we have got disks. We will have operating system disks. We will have caching disks, temporary disk we call it, and then we are also going to have data disks. So in this particular session we are going to talk about majorly the disks which are associated with a virtual machine. So primarily three: operating system, temporary, data disk is optional. You may or may not have data disk. If your application does not have any data to be stored, because your application is storing most of the data either in database or maybe in storage account, and you're not using any kind of storage of the disk, then it is not required. And honestly, in Azure kind of situation, better do not store data on the disk attached to the VM, because when we scale it, we are going to have multiple virtual machine instances. So the data of one data disk attached to one virtual machine will not be available to the other virtual machines. So you should know only that kind of data like configuration data, or maybe the logging data, or some kind of temporary action, so on, we would probably use the data disks for. Actually speaking, that job of temporary action is also supposed to be performed on the temporary disks. So let us understand this, certain facts about each one of them. Operating system disks are every virtual machine will have it, no doubt about it. And it's registered as SATA drive, a specific type of drive, and it is stored in either as a managed disk, or it's not put up there, but yes, operating system disk is either stored as a managed disk or is stored as a disk in your storage account. And we have seen that disk 128, 127 GB. We have seen that. A disk has a maximum capacity of 2 GB here. This particular OS disk will have a maximum capacity of 2 GB. Then we have got certain facts about temporary disk. Every machine is going to have a temporary disk. An important thing is, this is not a one which is managed by Azure. That means there is no background storage account used, or there is no direct storage account used. This is a disk which is directly connected to your virtual machine. The size of this particular disk is going to vary based on the size of the virtual machine which you choose. Remember, disk is different size. I mean, when we talk about the size of the disk, we are not talking about size of the virtual machine. But yes, of course, the size of the virtual machine which we choose from the list will decide what would be the size of temporary disk. On Windows virtual machine, the disk is labeled as D drive. Always D : it is referred as. Now, what is important is, as the name implies, it is temporary. Whatever you are going to store on that disk is going to be lost once you deprovision and reprovision your virtual machine. Once you stop the virtual machine, stop and deallocate, and then again when you restart your virtual machine, all the data on that disk is going to be lost. So yes, this particular disk is supposed to be used only for cached content. Whatever content we have probably fetched from a remote location, and thereafter for some time at least we can use it on our local disk. That content we can probably write to a temporary disk. Anything permanent, we should not use temporary disk. So where should I store anything permanent? Whenever we have something permanent, that we have to store it in the data disks. We can have multiple data disks attached to the virtual machine, and the number of data disks which we can attach to the virtual machine again varies from one virtual machine size to the other virtual machine size. So based on the size of the virtual machine, how many data disks can be there, that will be decided. Maximum we can have is 4 TB. One data disk can be of maximum 4 TB in size. That's pretty huge actually. Data disks are registered as SCSI drives and are labeled from F:. F, H, like that, F, G, H, I, J, K, like that. How many ever disks you are attaching, from then onwards it will start. The size of the virtual machine decides how many data disks can be attached, and the type of storage you can use to host the disks. Now when I say type of the storage, basically it is HDD or SSD, sorry. HDD, the standard disks which are cheaper in price, where otherwise a solid state drive which is expensive but has high rate of IO operations, faster disks. So the size will decide whether it is allowed or not allowed. Azure also creates data disks when it creates the virtual machine. Otherwise you can add data disks when you create your own virtual machine. So there are certain images in the gallery which will have data disk information included in them, not just the OS disk. We can have multiple VHDs contributing to the same image. So in those kind of cases, if there is something like that in the gallery, yes, data disk also will get created. But at any point of time, you can attach additional disks to the virtual machine. Certain important facts. If you are basically an architect, you will need to know all these things. Operating system and data disks are implemented as blob storage, both of them. They are in storage account. Whereas temporary disk is a local storage on Hyper-V host where the VM is running. Very, very, very important point. Temporary disk is very fast for the reason that it is local storage. That's why it is ideal for writing that data which is cached. So application developers, remember, you should figure out on that virtual machine what is the size of the temporary disk, and to that extent you can store data locally on that virtual machine through your application. You can read it later. Unless the virtual machine is shut down, all that data will be there. But of course, once the virtual machine is shut down and restarted, all that is lost. Now when we say storage account, we have learned earlier the storage account can be either the standard account or can be a premium account. Premium storage or standard storage. Standard storage gives you simple HDD drive, whereas premium storage is going to give you solid state drives. But yes, again, it's all depends on the size of the virtual machine which we choose. So these are different series we are going to discuss when we talk about the size of the virtual machine, based on which it is decided whether it is premium storage or whether it is normal standard storage which is used. Advantage of premium storage, much higher speed of reading and writing. So to add a new disk to your virtual machine, you must provide name of the disk, type of the disk, size of the disk, and of course the location and something called as host caching method. We'll see all this. All the disks are stored as VHD and the maximum capacity is 4 TB. Now sometimes this is going to become limitation. What if your file size itself is more than 4 TB? You want more TB of storage, maybe 5 TB, maybe 6 TB. That kind of file size itself is there, and that generally happens when you have large applications like data from SQL Server. You are trying to do caching. Probably you are trying to bring the whole SQL Server into memory, or probably you are working with SAP. Large applications, extremely large applications you are working with, and that kind of data would require you to have a single disk of more than 4 TB. So in those kind of cases, there is something called as virtual disk using storage spaces. So there is a provision, I am not getting into it. You have to figure out how you can actually merge multiple independent disks and create a single disk out of it. And for that you'll have to learn about storage spaces. So what is this? If your virtual machine is hosted on server 2012 and above, you can use storage pools to virtualize storage by grouping industry standard disk into pools, and then create virtual disk called as storage spaces from the available capacity in the storage pool. Storage pools makes it easy to grow or shrink volumes depending upon the need. Basically virtualization of disk, and you can keep on adding new disks, but it will be all treated as a single. You might put probably 100 disks together and still it will be treated as one single disk. I'm talking about extra large applications, not for ordinary applications where you want to store lot of data. So those kind of things you'll have to go for storage spaces where you create a pool of disks. Beyond the scope of my syllabus, you'll have to do it with the help of some networking engineer or maybe Windows administrator, and they should be able to help you. Since beginning we have been talking about unmanaged disks, actually standard disks. Unmanaged is wrong word there. Basically a standard disks in storage account. So we need to create our own storage in this case. And the limitation of this is every storage account we can get maximum of 20,000 IOPS, input output operations per second. That becomes the limitation of a storage account itself. You cannot have a requirement of more than 20,000 IOPS. So we need to ensure that we don't put too many disks in the same storage account, because we could exceed the scalability target of the storage account, which is 20,000, and resulting in virtual machine throttling. Every disk which we are going to choose has got its own IOPS limit. So by adding multiple disks, we are actually multiplying that IOPS limit. But when we put multiple disks in the storage account, let us say each disk has 5,000 IOPS. So 40 disk is what I would probably benefit from. Beyond 40, I would probably have already met my threshold, 20,000. And then the virtual machine is going to throttle. To overcome that kind of situation, we better make use of managed disks. Managed disks are the one which are managed by Microsoft Azure for us, by they internally creating a storage account for us in background. We don't have to do it. What they are doing is special hardware, and maybe on that special hardware they are storing some disks, and that becomes easy for us because we don't have to then worry about the scalability factor. So this limitation we do not have on managed disk. You can simply specify the disk size and performance, and Azure creates the managed disks for you, and they take care of it for us. Even as you are adding or scaling a virtual machine up and down, you don't have to worry about the storage being used. That's a beautiful advantage, and that is the reason for all virtual machines which we create today, we prefer having managed disk. Though we might pay probably little extra amount. You may have to go to Azure calculator and find out what is the extra amount you have to pay probably for that managed disk when compared to the storage account cost. You have to estimate like that. 4 TB is my requirement. So for 4 TB, what is that extra cost of the storage account? And 4 TB, what is the cost of the managed disk? Managed disk is also one of the resource. So find out what is the difference, and if it is affordable, go for managed disks over the storage account disks. And if you are pretty well sure that you don't need so much input output operations per second, you do not get into this particular category, then this will be comparatively cheaper when compared to managed disks. Though nowadays Microsoft is literally providing managed disk as a better solution for all kind of situations. But it's up to you. Microsoft doesn't always recommend based on cost. So if cost is a factor, standard disk would be better. If cost is not really a big major difference, then better go for managed disks. So how are we going to add the disks to the virtual machine? So let's see now how we can actually create a disk and attach it to a virtual machine. So go to virtual machine settings and then disks. Direct menu is there, and you can add a data disk here. Provide here this name. We don't have any disk already there, so we'll have to create a disk first. Create managed disk. Let's say my data disk. existing resource group, location, account type, SSD, source type. In case you want to use a disk which is already existing, you have probably already detached it from another virtual machine and you want to use that here, you have the choice of using snapshot. And yesterday we have seen how we can take the snapshot of a particular disk, and you can give here the size 1 TB, 4 TB, 1 GB, 4 GB, but as I said, it's GIB, you can see here gigabytes, and obviously as the size increases the cost will increase. Click on create. So once the virtual disk is created, we are going to then attach it to the virtual machine. So we have a disk created and already listed now. So click on add a disk if you want one more. Like that, multiple disks can be created. Important thing is I have to save it. Managed disk created since June 10, 2017 are encrypted at rest with storage service encryption. You may also want to use Azure disk encryption. So there are two types of encryptions actually. There is a disk encryption and there is also encryption at the storage level. Both, if you want, you can do that. So successfully updated. Now my virtual machine has 2 disks and I can actually go there and see that. But unless I mount it, we have just added the disk. We have to now initialize the disk. So unless we initialize the disk, we cannot make use of that disk. So for initialization, we will have to explicitly go to that particular virtual machine and perform certain actions. Let's do that. Remember, this particular aspect of initialization has nothing to do with Azure. What you have been doing it in your on-prem, the same thing you'll have to do over here also. So go to it's taking time. Yeah. Just search disk management.
You can go to the
So just open this computer management and then come to disk management, and it has automatically identified. Somebody has to mute. The voice is echoing. Thank you. Whatever disk was added, it has automatically identified that. Just click on OK. And right now it is unallocated. Now you'll have to do kind of allocation. So new simple volume. Click on next. Whatever volume of data you want to assign, the whole thing I'm using it. Assign the following drive letter. Format it. Give some name in case you want. And next and finish. The disk formatting will start and the disk will be ready, and after that it will be referred as the F drive, and you can start using that F drive for storing data, which eventually is going to store as a managed disk. We have this F drive. Okay, it's now prompting. Just say start. It will take a while. Let it go on. It will take some time, but that's what you'll have to do for making the drive ready. So two-step process. One is create the disk and attach to the virtual machine. Second is log into the virtual machine and initialize the data disk. That's what we'll have to do. And once you are done with all this, sometimes you want to detach it. So for detaching, what is the procedure? First, you will have to stop the virtual machine. To detach the disk, you'll have to stop the virtual machine, and after you stop the virtual machine, it will take a while as it is going on in the background. You'll have to go to the disk and you'll have to detach it. You'll get an icon here, something like a handshake. You'll have to click on that and you'll have to detach it. Once this is updated, it will happen. So basically this is the procedure to detach it. You'll see this icon. You'll have to click on it and detach it and then restart your virtual machine. Important thing is you'll have to stop the virtual machine before you detach it. And then, just for your reference, I've put this in case you want to use it. So there is RM disk for creating a managed data disk, and you have RM VM data disk. Just remember the difference. This method difference you have to remember. RM disk, RM VM data disk. So two different commands. Here it is only creating a disk and later it will be attached to a virtual machine by giving its ID. Whereas here we are specifying the virtual machine and attaching a disk based on the URI. So two different commands. In either case, you'll have to eventually update the virtual machine. So this is how you work with disks in context of a virtual machine. Probably by now the virtual machine is still not stopped. Yeah, it's taking a little longer time. Just click on edit, click on this detach and save it. It should be done. That's it. The virtual machine is detached. But the disk is there. What is important is the disk is still there. So don't forget to delete the disk in case you don't need it after this. You'll still have the data disk here. It is only detached. My data disk is still there. So probably I can use this data disk and attach it to another virtual machine. And you'll see it is unattached state. And how to deal with it further, we have already covered. We can probably take a snapshot of it, you can download it, and all the other actions we have already covered in the previous session. So that's all about disks. Thank you.